Hello again, this is Entropy.
And this is Lucifer.
Here again with the secret book of John. We are continuing into the introduction. Let's just get right into it. This section is called the Gnostic Gospel. The secret book of John is the Gnostic Gospel in the sense that Paul meant when he wrote that there being many Gospels, although, of course, Paul believed only his own gospel came from God. Paul uses the word gospel to mean a message about the nature of God and Christ and salvation, not a narrative biography of Jesus, as we now often use the word. The secret book of John has no biographical narrative apart from its opening lines. Nevertheless, because it is a message about the nature of God and Christ and salvation, it is a, quote, gospel, although certainly not one that Paul would have approved. It is a, quote, Gnostic gospel because it teaches that salvation comes from knowledge or, quote, gnosis, knowledge of our divine nature, our divine origin, and our ultimate goal, which is to be restored to our rightful place within God. And it is, quote, the Gnostic gospel because it is the first place among Gnostic writings, both literally in the Nag Humani volumes and figuratively. It gives the basic Gnostic message, one that other Gnostic texts, many of which are extensive and creative revisions of sections of the book of John, also give in their varied and creative ways. The secret book of John begins with a brief narrative passage telling us that we are reading is a revelation of the ascended Jesus Christ to his disciple John, son of Zebedee. The revelation itself occupies the text until the end, when Jesus and John appear once again to bring the book to its conclusion. Because of these beginnings and concluding passages, the whole text presents itself as Christian, a revelation by Jesus to one of his disciples. However, these sections were added to a pre-existing mythological book that was not Christian at all. It was a mythologized Middle Platonism combined with a Jewish inversion of the Genesis story and a Gnostic theory of the fall and salvation. Whether this non-Christian version of the secret book of John was chronologically pre-Christian is debatable. Many scholars think it probably came into being towards the end of the 1st century CE, but it is possible that it was in writing in one form or another a century more before that. Because the secret book of John was so important to the Gnostics, over the centuries many scribes added clarifying comments to it. Because the Gnostics valued change and creativity, which the Orthodox condemned as the matrix of heresy, the secret book of John went through many copies, versions, and editions. Accordingly, the copies we have today contain wide variations of comments and vocabulary blended into the main text. It does not flow smoothly, but when you get used to it, it's not so confusing. The secret book of John tells a history of God, beginning with the passages that stress God's incomprehensible nature. At first, we hear that God, quote, the One, cannot be discussed in words. But as we move along in the myth, the One becomes increasingly comprehensible. Soon we hear that the Godhead apprehends itself into the surrounding supernal light, and two-ness emerges. God and the God aware of God, or God and the self-consciousness of God. As the myth continues, the self-consciousness of God asks for and receives a set of mental faculties that appear to be structured in the manner of mandalas, circular diagrams with 4 different quadrants surrounding a more important central element. These mental faculties are described as if they constitute the royal court of heaven. We are reading about the gradual emergence of God's mind, a set of interacting capacities that come into being below, as it were, the ultimate level of the incomprehensible God. This is a developmental psychology, a descriptive Middle Platonic philosophy, and most importantly, a cosmic mythology, all rolled up into one. After the full development of the mind of God, a fullness called the pleroma in Greek has been outlined. A crisis occurs. One aspect of God's mind, its wisdom, Sophia in Greek, seeks to know an image of herself apart from the fullness. Sophia's individual effort has disastrous results. She discovers an image that is not the full mind of God at all, but a monster named Yaldabaoth, who appears to exist outside of God. This is a mistake on God's part, for God's wisdom is part of God at all times, and is perhaps even God going insane and imagining reality outside of God that cannot be. The consequences of this mistake occupy the rest of the secret book of John. We hear that Yaldabaoth, that being brought into existence by Sophia, begins to construct a world based on his inadequate, half-witted knowledge of the higher realms of God's mind. This is an artificial world, a bad imitation of the real world, a world that becomes our world. Yaldabaoth brings beings into existence who are his subordinate rulers, demons who dominate this lower artificial world, the divine powers of the wisdom of God, without whom nothing could exist, also act within this lower world. To return wisdom's stolen power to God, a plan comes down from the whole fullness of the mind of God. Yaldabaoth will be deceived so that he blows his power into a creature who will in turn restore that power to the higher realms. The divine realms are clearly revealed to Yaldabaoth and his demons, and they decide to construct a being modeled on that revelation. That being is Adam. He gains life and mobility after Yaldabaoth's power is blown into him. The higher realms of God send down mental powers, symbolized as Eve, to assist Adam. Both are, of course, symbolic beings and not real people. Yaldabaoth and his demons scheme to imprison Adam and Eve in matter in this world, but the higher realms send down revelation to assist them. The book concludes with a three-part hymn wherein revelation, called Providence, comes to the world to release us from bondage, for we are all Adam and Eve. Well, deep stuff here. Obviously, in just a page and a half. So let's go back over this and do a little bit of discussion. First of all, you see the distinction between the Paulinian church, which is the Christian church today, and the Gnostic church, which is obviously the true church that teaches us that we are divine in nature and not just these dirty rags that are servants of this demiurgic God.
And this church is without walls.
Absolutely right. This church is within. This is the holy...
the Holy of Holies, the holy sanctuary.
Yes, the sanctuary is within us, within our own bodies, within our own minds. So obviously there's a distinction between the Gnostic Gospels and the Gnostic teachings and the teachings of this abomination called the Christian church. And it just an aside here, it does not matter how decent these people in the Christian church may be. They are propagating lies, and they are continuing to keep people in slavery. So I don't care to hear how wonderful certain Christians may be. It is about their propagation of lies. They are feeding children with these lies, and they are bringing up children into this whole concept. Now, anyways, back to the introduction. So clearly stated here, this book, the book of John, the secret book of John, is not actually a Christian book at all. It's merely has a Christian beginning and a Christian ending, and is Platonic in nature. The Greek Platonism and the Jewish version of the Genesis story, as it says. Also interesting here is how he states that there's been many changes to this gospel over the years, and that as Gnostics, it is about evolving as people, is about not being stasis. Of course, to the Christian church, that is just pure evil. It is heresy. So as this Gnostic revelation comes to us even today, it is continuing to evolve. Here we get into a lot of the meat of this book. Now, he describes that God is a consciousness, and that God, as sort of a universal mind, has different central elements that develop. One of these is Sophia. And Sophia, for whatever reason, wants to know what, as it says in here, seeks to know the image of herself apart from the fullness, apart from the one. So her effort has disastrous results. And as a result, she creates what he refers to here as the Yaldabaoth, which I'm more familiar with just being called the Demiurge. Believe that is the same being.
Yes, it's the same being. He's the one that's in control of the universe, and he's the one that has imprisoned us.
Due to Sophia's actions, it's very interesting. It says that the consequences of this mistake is compared to even God going insane and in imagining a reality outside of God that cannot be. That is the quote-unquote reality that we exist in now. This is not our home, and anyone who would be listening to these videos would know exactly what I mean by that. So as Lucy said, Yaldabaoth brings into existence, who are his subordinate rulers, demons who dominate the lower artificial world, the divine powers of the wisdom of God, without whom nothing could exist, also act within this lower world. So here we are in a lower vibration, a lower world, and this is the way we have our existence now. But in order to restore this power to God, the higher realm understanding, the higher mental faculties, if you will, of the universal mind, the higher God tricks the Yaldabaoth, the Demiurge, into creating Adam and Eve, who are figurative, of course, and not literal. And in doing so, he creates a being that can help to restore the God nature and bring God back to, if you like, sanity.
Or its fullness.
Back to the oneness nature that we are all part of. So here we have the very another little part of the introduction. We will be continuing this again, and I hope everyone is enjoying it. It really would benefit anyone who's listening to get this book for themselves so that they can follow along much better. It is very deep. We're getting to some deep waters here.
Well, this is Lucifera.
And this is Entropy signing off again. Talk again soon. Bye.